Okay, Baruch Hashem, we are continuing in the Tzurba Rabbanon in volume 16, the Weiss family volume, the first volume in Hilchot Shabbat. And up until now, we dealt with some of the halachot of Erev Shabbat. We've dealt with some of the halachot of Hadlakas Neros. We've dealt with the halachot of accepting Shabbat. We past couple of weeks have spent time on Hilchot of Tifilot Shabbat, and today we're starting on another very important concept of Shabbat, which is Torah on Shabbat. Okay, so we're on page 277, and we really have two factors of Torah on Shabbat that we're going to be dealing with today. And as you see, the Shir Zion, this is the seventh Shir, is titled Shnayim Mikra ve'echad Targum and Kriyat HaTorah b'Shabbat. So we know that one of the high points of Shabbat is the reading of the Torah between Shacharit and Musaf. And let's take a look. Let's dive right in to Shnayim Mikra ve'echad Targum. Some people may not even be aware that there is a mitzvah that's brought down in Shulchan Aruch that we're going to see today, and the mitzvah is known as Shnayim Mikra ve'echad Targum. It literally translates into reading, to read the text twice and once the Targum, or Targum according to the Temanim, right, which means a translation, the Aramaic translation. So let's take a look. The Sechtas Brachas, this is where the source is. Source number 1, page 277. Amar Rabbi Yehuda bar Yehuda, Amar Rabbi Ami lo olam. Always, people should yashlim Adam Parshiosav im Hatzibur. A person needs to complete his parsha with the congregation. It has something to do with the Shabbat reading. When you finish the Shabbat reading, a person should finish his reading too. What type of reading? Shnayim Mikra ve'echad Targum. A person needs to do Shnayim Mikra and once the Targum. Va'afilu, the Gemara says, Ateres v'divon. Ateres v'divon are just names. And the Targum is the exact same names as the pasuk. Yet you still have to read that Targum. That's the exact same words as the pasuk. Why? So anybody who does Shnayim Mikra ve'echad Targum, this is a segula for long life. So you're looking for the elixir of life. The elixir of life, page 277, is Shnayim Mikra ve'echad Targum. Okay? Right, so you get your time back. That's true. Part of what they say is, since Shnayim Mikra ve'echad Targum it's a substantial amount of time. It's not a crazy amount of time, but it takes time. And you get your time back in reward, not only in quantity, but also in the quality of days. Right? Ben Yehuda always says, Yomo v'shnoisa, when it says those two lashonos, it means quantity and quality. It's both. Okay, because you can have many, many long days, but you can be on a respirator, you can be on a ventilator, you can be in you can have very long days, pretty much a dead person. But you want to have long days in quality of life, quantity and equality. Yomov u'shnosa. Rashi says, Ateres v'divon she'ein bo Targum. There is no real Targum on that pasuk, as it's just names. Still, you have to read it. Says Tosfos, we're on source number 3 on page 278. He says, there are some people who say that if you don't understand Targum, right, because Targum is Aramaic, as Rabbi David told us, you don't understand Targum, right? The whole point of Targum was it's literally a translation.
On those days,
right? And the way they used to read it, but the Temanim still today, on Shabbat morning, when they read the pasuk, then they read the Targum. The whole point was people should understand what they're hearing, right? Imagine doing that today, how much longer our tefillot would be. You have to understand every pasuk, right? But that was the point of it. So Targum is to understand it. So some halachic authorities, Tosfot said, say you don't need to do Targum. You can do any language you understand, because the whole point is to understand it. But right, the main language
was Aramaic.
What they call the vernacular.
They read the Torah.
Right,
they didn't understand. That's what they had to do the Targum.
So the vernacular of the day was Aramaic. But says Tosfos in the second paragraph, he says, He says it's not convincing, right? The Aramaic is not just a translation because there's more in the Targum that's in the pasuk. He says, "Al kain ein loymer mishum lashon pam shlishish ki im belashon Targum." So Tosfot's saying a chidush here. He's saying, don't think Targum is just a translation. Targum is more than a translation. It's also an explanation.
Right.
And therefore, it has to be Targum. It can't be something else. Because other translations, like King James Version of the Bible, is just translating it all wrong. Okay? Perhaps, there are those who want to say, if you take the stone edition Chumash, right, the article put out, and on the bottom, it has a fabulous commentary. If you haven't yet read that commentary in completion, right, we're going to see Rashi in a minute, but that commentary is a very in-depth commentary, a very classic commentary, very good commentary. Perhaps that's an explanation, but even Tosfot there would not agree to that. Tosfot says Targum is Targum. Ki im belashon Targum. The Rush says, and this is where everyone gets the Rashi. The Rush says, "Benira shahakara bepirish HaTorah yoytze bo yedei Targum." If you read a pirush, the Rush doesn't say which pirush, but his son, right, the Tur, says that his father meant Rashi. Kivan shemipurish boy kol mila mamila, since it explains every single word. The Rashi gives an explanation, but it's not entirely true because Rashi doesn't give an explanation in every word. There are psukim and psukim that don't have Rashi, but for whatever reason, the Rush says that there's a good understanding from Rashi, and Rashi can be used instead of Targum. Says the Smag. He said, I argued in front of my teachers that Pirushim, such as Rashi, is greater than Targum. And he says, some teachers agreed, but Rabbeinu Yitzchak did not. Rav Amram and Rav Natronai Geonim, they said no, and they said it must be Targum, and they give a reason. Dafka Targum, Shazachali Naten B'Sinai. Oh, when was Targum Unclus given? We usually call it Targum Unclus. But they're bringing down that Targum was given at Har Sinai with the Torah. Therefore, there's a special degree of holiness that comes with the Targum. Therefore, it has to be Targum, said these Geonim. Says the Shulchan Aruch. No, we didn't. The Targum, what we call Targum Unclus, was a Targum that was given in Har Sinai, says the Geonim. Shulchan Aruch, Im Lama Parsha Bepirush Rashi. So Shulchan Aruch says Beferish, if you learned Rashi, Chashav Kimoy Targum. It's like you read the Targum, but now says the Shulchan Aruch, V'yir Shemayim, Yikra Targum, the Gam Pirish Rashi. You want to do it really right? You want to do Shnayim Mikra Targum right? Shnayim Mikra, the Echad Targum, and Rashi. That's the right way to do it. That's the way Yir Shemayim will do it. He would do all of them, right? And says in Mishnah B'Ram, he says, well, Kriyat Targum, Yesh Lo Ma'ala, Shinitim B'Sinai. Targum is very special because it was given in Har Sinai. The Gam Hu Mefarish Kol Mila Mila explains every single word. Upirish Rashi Yesh Lo Ma'ala, Shehu Mefarish Ta'inyan. It explains the topic, the explanations of what's going on. Al Pi Midrash Chazal, Yotem Targum. And therefore, he says also, a person should do both Targum and Rashi.
Rabbi, can I ask you a quick question?
Yes.
But isn't this all working with the assumption that when a person is reading Targum, he's actually understanding what he's reading? But I would argue, at least I'm speaking for myself, that when I'm reading Targum, many times I don't understand what I'm reading, and therefore it becomes a tedious exercise.
I'm happy that you brought that up.
What page are we on?
We're on page 279 right now. First, in source number 3, Tosa does bring this down. He says there are those who say you can read it in any language because you understand it. But Tosa says, no, it has to be Targum because Targum is a very special translation. Now, Rav Belsky, this can be found in Halachically Speaking, volume number 1 on page 180 something over there. They have a whole topic on Shnayim Mikra Targum and the Piskei of Rav Belsky. Rav Belsky writes He says, no, Adarabba, read the Targum. He says, because Targum is Aramaic, as is the Gemara. And he says, and the longer you practice, but you have to really pay attention when you're reading it. I mean, you understand the Hebrew. So when you read now the Aramaic after the Hebrew, the Aramaic words you should start getting used to it. And he says, practice makes perfect. And the longer you do Targum, the more words you're going to understand. It's going to help you understand Gemara as well. But you have to do it to understand it. Meaning, you can't just rush through it. If you rush through it, then you're definitely not going to understand it. But if you take the time to do Shnayim Mikra Targum right, eventually you're going to learn more Aramaic words and it's become more easier to you.
That's what I did many years ago. Now.
Yeah, say it.
About many years ago, my rabbi told me to do one aliyah a year, but do it well.
Right. So Rebelsky brings that down as well. He says, do up to Sheni and Shlishi correctly, and then this way, over the years, you'll get the experience as well. I tell you that we'll get into a couple more things, but that idea, Shalom, is Rebelsky does get on that. Now, yeah, it does seep in. It does seep in. I can tell you from my own experience, it does seep in. Okay, I may not know every single Aramaic word, but over the years, you start to understand a lot more. And then I would also of the Targum. I would also say that you have to be a person who learns Gemara, person who learns Aramaic, person who learns reading Hebrew. Us as Jews, we know more than one language, and being somewhat of a linguist, right? You'll start seeing words in multiple languages and how you realize their relations of them. And Targum and the Gemara, everything becomes easier once you understand how languages relate to one another. And for that, I would just, side note, the Steinsaltz Gemara, the current one that the current publishers put out, he does a beautiful job. He brings Aramaic words in the Gemara that, like, how do you get the translation? He'll show you the shorish of the word, where it comes from, Greek, Arabic, or wherever it is, wherever the languages it is. It helps you build your linguistic skills. But that is something that you get out of doing Shnayim Mikra Targum as well. Before we move on, we have to ask ourselves a question. The whole source of Shnayim Mikra Targum is sourced in the Gemara, right? And we come along, right? And we say, you know what? You can use Rashi as well. Rashi's way after the Gemara, hundreds of years after the Gemara, right? And all of a sudden, Rashi gets on the same footing as the mitzvah that's brought down in the Gemara. It's kind of hard to understand. There's Torah, there's Targum, all that was in the times of the Talmud. The Talmud says Shnayim Mikra Targum, and we say Rashi. You can take Rashi instead. You have to understand the cheshivas of Rashi. Rabbeinu Tam once commented and said, I understand, I can fathom how Rashi wrote his commentary on Shas, but I cannot fathom how Rashi wrote the commentary on Chumash. That was Rabbeinu Tam said. Rabbeinu Tam was Rabbeinu Tam, right? So obviously there's a lot in Rashi, and it cannot be taken lightly, right? There are some individuals that like to say, Rashi is too much in midrashim and stuff like that. But Rashi is even the Ramban, right? The Ramban and Nachmanides in his introduction to his Pirush says, there's the father of all Pirushim, and that's Rashi, right? Rabbeinu Shalom. Okay, moving on. In source number 9 on page 280, the Oral Etzion says, not just Targum, there's another Targum called Targum Yerushalmi. You got to do that too. Okay, so you have Targum Onkelos, you got to do Targum Yerushalmi as well. What? Source number 9, page 280. Okay. Be'er Hated, source 10. He writes over here, can you use another commentary? Right? Let's say Rashi's too hard. So they in Germany, they had a commentary that was used by many of the simple people. It was called Tzena Urena. They actually still sell it. You can find it. They have it in English as well. But he says, yeah, you can use Tzena Urena. And that's where they say, that's why you can use the Stone Edition's commentary, which is a rabbinical commentary on the Chumash, because it's another commentary. But again, we're going to see that we really should be doing the Targum. The Sefer Yagal Yaakov says you can do Rashi in English, right? Because we want you to understand it. So that would be fine. Okay. So
Rabbi, the problem with Rashi is that there isn't a Rashi in every pasuk.
Ah, very good. So we're going to see that when there is no Rashi, you'll have, according to those who use Rashi, if there is no Rashi, you would do the pasuk the third time. You would do the pasuk the third time if you don't have a Rashi. Okay, fine. Okay. Now the Magen Avram wants to bring an easier way for us to do Shnayim Mikra Targum, and he says, you know what? If you listen to the Kriya in shul, perhaps that can count as one of the readings, one of the Shnayim Mikras, one of the Mikras. Mishnah Berurah says not very comfortable with this. Perhaps you should read it word for word with the Baal Koreh. Okay, says the Yalkut Yosef, source 14. Misha Shah, the Chukaloi B'Yoter. Someone doesn't have enough time. I think we all fall into that category, unfortunately. Targum. Okay, so the Yalkut Yosef says it clear. The Magen Avram wanted to say listen to it and that's enough. No, you have to listen to it and read it with the Baal Koreh at the same time, and perhaps that can work. That can work for you. What? The what? No, you can. You have to read it with them word for word. Read it with them word for word. Yeah, to get Mikra twice. You have to get Mikra twice. Mikra once. The guy's not getting it. It's Shnayim Mikra. So I did first Mikra in shul when the Chazan, the Baal Koreh was reading it. That's one Mikra. Then I get the second Mikra when I do it at home alone. And then I do the Targum. So I get Shnayim Mikra Targum. You did. You saved time from reading it another whole time. Outside of shul. Okay. Interestingly to note, it's not brought down here in the Tzurba, but it's brought down in the Yalkut Yosef, brought down multiple places in the Yalkut Yosef. We're looking at Hilchos Shabbos, number 1, page 293, Halacha 11 over here. You have a Baal Koreh that Mashiach Tzibur Marich b'ta'amim b'kriyasai b'tarei b'oifen shkol v'yachel la'aspek l'kriyat al Shnayim Mikra Targum v'eit Kriyat HaTorah. All right, the Baal Koreh is reading in actual time. All right, he's very taking a lot of time to do the ta'amim. He's very medaktek, and you can do all of Shnayim Mikra Targum while he's reading the Torah. So he says, Rashayla Astoke, you're allowed to do that. The Yotzei Dechavoso. You can read Shnayim Mikra, the whole thing.
You don't hear the Shalach Tzibur.
Ava Bisha Be'esh Shekar Shnayim Mikra Targum La'atzmoi Enu Ma'azin Likriyat Parsha Alidei Sheikh Tzibur. Even though he's now listening to the Baal Koreh. He says you can do this. Chutz Mikriyas Parsha Zocher or Parsha Para Shechayv Lahazin Likrasan Sheikh Tzibur B'Sefer Torah. Then you have to listen to the Sheikh Tzibur when he's reading it. Parsha Para, Parsha Zocher. So then you can't do Yishnayim Mikra during that time.
This way.
The Chol Zed Kishikara Parsha Balach. You use whispering. V'yesh Asar Biladav Hamakshivim L'Shliach Tzibur. And there are 10 people who are listening to the person who's actually reading it. Or Shikarim Kriyas HaTorah Hesed Panel L'Tzad V'Hischil L'Kroy. Or he can turn his way away from the Torah when it's being read, and he can do his Shnayim Mikra. And he says, "V'kol makom hanachon hu shev'chol parsha d'roil l'medaktek v'darchav l'kaven l'chivim datay v'l'shmoy Kriyas HaTorah v'plei Sheikh Tzibur." But he ends up by saying it's better not to do this. It's better to pay attention to when it's being read.
This is probably Ashkenazi, this boy says.
No, it's not Ashkenazi. This is actually Shulchan Aruch. The Ashkenazim will say not to do this. Yeah, Shulchan Aruch
So
says
he's
you can
giving
do
a petah over here to people not to listen to the.
Yes, he is. The Ashkenazim actually don't take that approach at all. They go not with this approach. But the Shulchan Aruch brings it down. The Yalkut Yosef goes with this approach. That's the Shulchan Aruch says that you can do.
Rabbi,
yes.
Rabbi, is it because listening to the Torah is a chovat tzibur as opposed
That's
to
correct.
a chovat?
That's correct. We
And therefore, yeah, and therefore it's okay if you do. Yeah.
Is Kriyas? It falls on the tzibur, And as such, if there's a tzibur, then I can do my thing, and I can do my thing on the side. Again,
I feel vindicated.
I would say, what do you say?
I said I feel vindicated.
Okay. I would say though, a few comments on this before moving on. First of all, if you are someone in the shul that people look up to, right? They may look to you for halacha, look to you for halacha guidance, they look to you for inspiration, then perhaps you should not be doing this, because then people are going to get the wrong idea. Okay, they're going to say, hey, this rabbi, this individual is doing his own thing during Kriyat, even though he's doing something that's the heter and it's completely mutter and the Shulchan Aruch says it's okay, but people will get the wrong idea from it, and it can lead to b'zayin of Kriyat HaTorah. Therefore, I would suggest in such cases a person should be very careful. If you can do it in a way people don't realize, that's one way. Otherwise, you should be careful to listen. Okay, because especially young people in the shul, they look up to the elders and they want to see how they're doing. Right? If they see all the elders going around and doing things that are contrary to the covenant of the Torah and contrary to what should be done, it can make a b'zayin. It could do something wrong. I'll tell you one thing for me, even till this very day. Something that davening in places, and Tamil Chachamim during Chazar Shashatz are taking out Sfarim and reading it during Chazar Shashatz, and the halacha says you can't do that, and they're doing it. So it bothers me because I don't know what to tell them. They're obviously greater people than me, but they're doing it, and halacha says you shouldn't be doing that. So I don't know. Maybe they know something I don't know, and that it's okay. And then so if it's okay, maybe I can do it too. Then maybe everyone can do it too, and no one answers Baruch Hu Shema Amen. So I think that's a very important thing to pay attention when doing anything that may be misconstrued. Okay, continuing on in Shnayim Targum, details of the mitzvah. What is the best way to do this mitzvah? Shnayim Mikra ve'echad Targum. So he brings the Mishnah Berurah, Yesharmam Sheyikra Kol Pasuk Beis Pamim v'Targum Alav, and then make the Targum. Yesharmam Sheyikra Kol Parsha Beis Pamim v'Achar Kach Targum. So what is the proper way of doing it? So it's brought down according to the Kabbalists here in the Yalkut Yosef. It says the Kabbalists say the best way to do it is all in one day on Friday morning, right? After Shacharit, you sit down. I believe I don't know if he brings here the Talis and Tefillin, but I remember seeing somewhere they say in your Talis and Tefillin after davening Shacharit, you sit down and you do all Shnayim Mikra Targum, and you do every pasuk twice and once the Targum, twice the pasuk, once the Targum. That is the Kabbalistic best way to do it. That's what's brought down here. There are others that have different approaches. The Aruch HaShulchan in source 16 say people do it this way, people do it that way, and perhaps there is no one set way. And maybe 1 week you can do it this way, in 1 week you can do it that way. Right? Source 17 says Aruch HaShulchan. He says, I don't know if you have to do Mikra twice and then Targum. Can you do Mikra, Targum, Mikra? Can I do it that way? In fact, the Chazon Ish did do it that way. The Chazon Ish held that was the best way to do it. There are others who say, no, it has to be twice Mikra and then the Targum. I'll just say, I am knowing to do Mikra, Targum, Mikra. And one of the reasons is that also helps me understand the Targum. Because if I do the Mikra once, and then I do the Targum, and then I do Mikra again, I'm able to understand the Targum better, because I'm reading the Hebrew, and then sandwiching the Targum in the middle, and then the Mikra again. So there are those who say, you shouldn't be doing it that way. There are those who say that that is the proper way of doing it. So take a look at footnote number 9 on page 283. He brings the Chazon Ish himself performed Shnayim Mikra in this manner of Mikra, Targum, Mikra. And the Dirshu edition of Mishnah Berurah, which cites the Mikor Chaim, is saying this is even the ideal manner to perform the mitzvah. But there are those who disagree. The Kabbalists say, no, you cannot do it that way. It's got to be twice Mikra and then the Targum. Myself? You can do either way. So there is a preferable way, Kabbalistic way. Twice the pasuk, once the Targum, each pasuk by itself. But we see l'halacha, you can do it either way. You can do the whole parsha once, you can do the Targum once, in a sense. Whichever's to read it once in a row, right?
Not only Kabbalistic, if the goal is to learn the Aramaic, then probably the most efficient way of doing it is to read the pasuk, and then read the Aramaic so that you can learn the words.
You can understand it, right? 100%. 100%. I just want, before we move on, I want to read from the Yalkut Yosef English edition outside of the Tzurba. 2 halachas here quickly. Okay, we talked about the Kabbalists. That's fine. So the second halacha I wanted to bring down There's halacha number 14 on page 294. He says over here, one should read the verses of the parsha with what? Ta'ameh HaMikra. Okay, the Yalkut Joseph Chamulaji was very, you see it in many sources. He wants people reading with Ta'ameh HaMikra, with reading with the trup, reading with the Ta'amim, and not just some of the Ta'amim. I've been to shuls where people are laning and they only do the high notes, okay? And they forget about Darga and Tevir and everything else, Yitiv, and everything else just goes out the window. It's just Azla, Gerish, Talsa, and Pazir Gadol. Those are the main things, Shnei Gerishin, and finish. Everything else is out the window. No, nachon. You have to read with Ta'ameh HaMikra. And then the Targum without the Ta'amim. And he says further, anyone who doesn't know how to chant it with traditional notes must do so. It's a sacred obligation. And he says further that parents and teachers must see to it that the youth are taught how to read with Ta'amim. I remember when I was in yeshiva and I was getting bar mitzvah and I went to Ashkenaz yeshiva. And my father started setting me up with Chazan Simon Yecheskel to learn from him the Ta'ameh HaMikra. And I remember telling after my mitzvah also, I continued learning with Chazan Simon Yecheskel for a few years. I remember telling my menal that I was going to learn the Ta'amim. I was going to learn instead of Mishmar, I had to leave to go there. So my menal, who was a menal actually before that in HaTorah, tells me, now you're learning to do the Sephardic Nigunim and Ta'amim? He says in HaTorah, they're teaching the Syrian boys already from when they're 3 years old how to read with Ta'amim. What are you learning so late for? You know, to say amen, right? As soon as they start knowing a read, gotta start learning Ta'amim. The people have to know how to read, and they have to read Noda Collective. Gemara Megillah says the Ta'amim is all the story of the Torah is in the Ta'amim. It's very important to know. It says the Yalkut Joseph doing Shnayim Targum properly is including the Ta'amim. So again and again, we see that Shnayim Mikra is not just a rush job, but it should have been something that was done step by step and gaining a lot from it. The question now is, in the source number 18, the Beit Yosef has a discussion about Shnayim Mikra on Yom Tov. Right? The Yom Tov reading is different. It's not the Parsha Shvuah. So do I have to do Shnayim Mikra on Yom Tov? So he brings down different opinions. He brings that Tzurba Tadeshin and Rabbeinu Chananel that tell us the reason of Shnayim Mikra is that you become familiar with the reading that we're about to read, right? As it says, the whole point was to finish the reading with the tzibur. So you're about to read in the shul, so perhaps you should know what you're reading. So even on Yom Tov, you should know what you're reading. But the Beit Yosef says no. He says it's not what the Gaonim said. It's not what the Gaonim did. And says the Shulchan Aruch in source 19, Ein tzarich l'kos parshas Yom Tov. We do not have to do Shnayim Mikra on Yom Tov. All right, so on Yom Tov, you have more time to do other things. You don't have to do Shnayim Mikra. Says the Aruch HaShulchan. Says, you know what the reason is? He says, the takana zu shekol echad yikra Shnayim Mikra Targum v'alavush kasa kadeshia baki b'Torah. The reason why we do Shnayim Mikra Targum, says the Levush, is in order so we become Bekim b'Torah. We should know the Torah. We should know Psukim of Torah, how the Torah phrases its verses and words. And so he says that the way we do this is through the Parsha Shvuah, right? The way we do this through the Parsha Shvuah. Shnayim Mikra and the Parsha Shvuah lets you become Bekim b'Torah, right? Right. So not just for one Yom Tov. So you don't need to do it for the Yom Tov because that's not going to help you become Bekim b'Torah because that's just random, not random, but it's not in order. It's not like a process. So that's what he seems to be saying here in the Aruch HaShulchan. What about Shnayim Mikra on Haftarot? So says the Ramah, in ain't tzarich likros haftaros. However, nahagu likros haftarah. It became the minhag to read the Haftarah one time. All right, so the minhag is to read the Haftarah one time. We're going to see later on in the shir that the Arizal's minhag and nusach was to everyone was supposed to read the Haftarah. The Shas Haftarah was being read, right? And it's brought down in the Yalkut Joseph that tzarich says tzarich. You have to read the Haftarah while the Haftarah is being read in the shul. That's why the Chassidim who follow the Arizal, they do not have one person reading the Haftarah itself, right? It goes, everyone, when it gets to Haftarah by Chassidim, everybody reads it. And there's no one person leading it, right? Because the Arizal said, shouldn't be one person reading, everyone needs to be reading it. The Mishnah Berurah says, we'll come to this later on, Mishnah Berurah says that if you're not reading it from a klaf, perhaps the people who are listening can't be yotzeh through the reading, and perhaps everyone should be reading it themselves, right? So, all right, that we'll have to deal with that time. All right, let's move on. Let's move on.
Rabbi, just one quick
Yes.
One quick question. According to the Akut Yosef, if one reads the Shnayim Mikra without the Ta'amim, is he Yotze?
Of course.
Okay.
Of course. Yes. Yeah. Okay. The question: when can we start? When can we start Shnayim Mikra? Where? Because you always want to end up with the parsha, with the Mikra. You don't want to end up with Targum. That's why it's repeated again. Okay. So, when can we start? When can we start the Shnayim Mikra? Okay, so here he says from Mincha of Shabbat, Tosfot, he says it appears the whole week from the time that we start to read the parsha. When do we start to read the new parsha? Mincha on Shabbat. However, the Kolbo says no. He says parsha from Sunday. He has fulfilled his obligation. And he says v'dafka miyom echad ve'elech al v'shabbos v'mincha fil acher shekara parsha v'tzibur lo yatsa kim shoyis hayom kara parsha she'avra kach ner l'Rabbeinu Peretz. So says the Kolbo, it's got to be Sunday. Can't be mincha on Shabbat. Okay, Shulchan Aruch says miyom rishon ve'elech chashav v'matzibur. Right, so he says Shulchan Aruch says from Sunday. Mishnah Berurah says Shulchan Aruch is lav dafka. He doesn't mean Sunday. He means Shabbos mincha time. Shabbos mincha time. But and the question now is, what does mincha time and Shabbos mean? So source 26 on page 286 tells us Shmir Shabbos Kilchata, tells us that it's when you could daven mincha. So once it hits mincha gedola, you can already start doing it. Rav Chaim Kanievsky says no, it's not when it could be mincha. It's when you daven mincha, and then you can start. What about for us Sephardim? Is that same halacha that it can start from mincha, or perhaps the Shulchan Aruch is not like the Mishnah Berurah says lav dafka? So, give me 1 second. Here in the Sefer Chai Olamim, Rav Yonatan Akson, on page 193, he writes over here. One may begin reading the next parsha no earlier than Sunday. And he brings this over here that he says from the Yaskil Avdi. We're going to see who the Yaskil Avdi is. Who says the Shulchan Aruch is meant to be taken literally. He's arguing with the Mishnah Berurah. Shabbat says, Lav Dafka, you can start Mincha on Shabbat. He says, no, it's meant to be taken literally. Halacha Berurah says that if you know that if you don't start Mincha Shabbat, you're not going to have time during the week, then, Mincha Shabbat, you can start it. But if you're going to have time later on, you just want to get an early start in it, then you should really wait till Sunday to start. Yeah, technically the question is if you do it at night, right? Mikra on nights, okay? We'll worry about that soon. Okay. Well, I'm not getting into that in that moment. Can you do Mikra at night? So we usually say, even though according to Kabbalah it's improper to read Mikra at night, one may read Targum at night. He says over here, if he reads it along with the commentary of Rashi, because then it's learning and it's not Mikra, right? On Thursday night, it's definitely permitted. On Friday night and Motzei Shabbat, it's permitted to learn Mikra even without Rashi, right? Again, and then you have that other opinion, like if you're if you're reading it as you're davening it, then perhaps you can also do it, right? If you're not just reading Mikra, but you're davening Mikra, it's unfortunate, but if you're doing that, perhaps that would also be permissible at night. Okay. Anyway,
Rabbi, just for clarification, is the mitzvah Shnayim Mikra Targum, is every parsha considered to be one mitzvah, or is it all the parashot of the Torah is considered to be one big mitzvah?
You're saying is every parsha a separate mitzvah, or is it a whole year's mitzvah?
It's machloket, no?
Yeah,
it's a good question. It's a good question. I would say I don't know. What I could say is that the Gemara tells us that if you didn't finish it on time, you have up until Shmini Atzeres, till Simchas Torah, to read it. So it seems to be that it's a whole set. If you learn like the Levush is to become B'kiyim B'Torah, then and it's every Parsha Shvua that we want to get you to know, that perhaps it's to know the whole Torah, right? So it's not just knowing one Parsha. Of course, every piece is a good thing. Again, I don't know Tzarech Ian on that. Okay, as we continue, what about the completion? When do you have to complete Shnayim Mikra V'echad Targum? So Tosfot, Mesechus Brachos, where this halacha is brought, brings a midrash that Rabbeinu HaKadosh gave certain commandments and suggestions, recommendations to his children when he was being nifter. And he told them, Shelo tochel lechem b'Shabbos ad shetigmeru kol haparsha. The mashma, the koydem achila tzarich lashlim, that you should finish Shnayim Mikra Targum before you eat. Right? Mistama, it means Shabbos morning meal, because you have to finish it with, remember, mashlim im hatzibor, and you're reading it during Shabbos morning. So before the morning Suda, that's the ideal time to finish it by. Okay, that's the ideal time to finish it by. Says the Torah, the source 28. He says that you should do that from then on, since we start another parsha. Time for reading has passed. So the Torah says you have until Mincha of Shabbat. Mincha. Right, let's go back to what does Mincha mean. Does Mincha mean when Mincha starts, or does Mincha mean when I daven Mincha? Reb Chaim Kanievsky, right, we go back to that machlokas. However, the Hagot Maminot brings down that, like we all know, that you have until Wednesday, right? Up until Tuesday evening, you have until then to finish Shnayim Mikra Targum. Okay? It brings down the Shulchan Aruch. Mitzvah min ha-muchar sheyashlim oiseh koydem she'achol b'Shabbos. The mitzvah is to finish it before the morning Suda on Shabbat. V'hishlim koydem v'chil yashlim achar chil ad mincha. V'yesh omrim ad revi b'Shabbos. Up until Wednesday. V'yesh omrim, and here comes the yesh omrim, ad shmini atzeres l'haynu b'simchas Torah she'az mashlimin hatzibur. So sometimes you'll see people, right, the day before Simchas Torah are sitting there with the chumash and they're doing Shnayim Mikra for the whole year, right? I don't know, the whole year, but for part of the year. I remember the year that I got married. I believe it was Parshas Pekudei or something around there, and Kisisa or Pekudei, and I that week I just couldn't get the Shnayim Mikra Targum. It just wasn't possible. And then I didn't have time the next week to make it up. But that year Simchas Torah. So before Simchas Torah, I made up that parsha because I wasn't able to do it that week. So I always kept in the back of my head until I had some free time that day, and we did it. Yeah, you continue going with what you are, because hishlim im hatzibor, right? You want to finish it with the tzibor, and then you use that same lashon for Simchas Torah, because Simchas Torah, your hishlim is kol haTorah im hatzibor. So you finish up whatever you didn't finish yet, and you finish it up. That's the way I understood it. Bringing down that it's a mitzvah. Yeah. Mitzvah min ha-muchar. No, we don't make a bracha on it. Good question. Sorry, Chian. You have an answer?
I mean, I have a question. There's 7 mitzvot there, and it's not one of the 7.
Very good. So what's the answer to it?
No idea.
Very good. I don't know either.
That's what I'm saying. I don't think it's me. I think it's a whole.
It's a show. Okay.
Give it the name
Okay. Okay. Good. Good. Very good. Very good. It's a chayv. Very good. It's a chayv. Fine. It's an obligation. It's brought down in Shulchan Aruch. Very good. Okay. Next.
It says in a note down there, according to Arizal, one should complete the parsha on Friday.
Right. I said the Kabbalists say to finish it Friday morning.
And I heard that it's best to complete it before dipping in the mikveh Erev Shabbat.
This is already further Kabbalistic. Before going to the mikveh.
It's a very powerful Kabbalistic, So
I heard you have to finish it in the mikveh, when you're in the mikveh.
I never heard that one, but if you guys hear better.
He said what? While you're in the mikveh?
No, I was joking.
Shalom.
Okay. I just want to see what I wrote over here. 292, halacha 5 in the Yalkut Yosef. Same thing. Okay, everything that we said. All right. Now, what about women reading Shnayim Mikra Echad Targum? Right. So in my experience in life, women like to do things that they have no chiyuv in, right? All of a sudden they want to do stuff, right? And what they're mechuyev in, they don't bother with. I think everybody's like that, not just the women. The men are the same thing. Like something I have to do, forget it. I'm not doing it. I don't have to do this. Okay, how can I do it? Okay, so Shnayim Echad Targum. Are women obligated in it or not? Says the Yalkut Yosef in his Ha'ara Yud Aleph over here in Orchaim 285, note 11. He writes the main reason for the institution, the takana, they use the lashon of takana, his takana l'kar Shnayim Mikra Targum, who could a lilmo is HaTorah v'levena, in order to learn it and know it. The kivin shenashim b'Torah mitzvahs limud Torah, since women don't have a mitzvah of limud Torah like men do, so therefore they're pater Mikra Shnayim Mikra Targum. Now, even to the poskim who say that women sheisha tzricha l'shmaya Kriyat HaTorah, that they should listen to the Torah reading. He says it's because it's a mitzvah like Hakel. Listening to the Torah is like listening to Hakel. Everyone has to get together and listen. But we who say that listening is only a chiyuv on the tzibur and not on the yachid, so therefore there's no reason for a woman to need to do Shnayim Mikra Targum. There's no chiyuv on them. The Panini Halacha, or Lezer Melamed, says nevertheless, if they wish to participate in a Torah reading and study the Parsha and do Shnayim Mikra Targum, he says, good for that. Yesh Len Mitzvah. In the laws of Shabbat, Rabbi Yonatan Nakson, he writes about women doing Shnayim Mikra Targum, and he writes as follows. However, if they want to read it anyways, it is praiseworthy to do so. Okay, he brings this from Halichat Olam, Chazon Avadia, and other sources over here. Okay, so apparently the woman wants to do it, and they have the time somehow. Then Kol HaKavod, if they want, they can go ahead and do it. The Geonim, Shuvas HaGeonim, it brings down as follows, source 33. That which you asked about a Torah scholar who does not want to arrange his Parshiot, doesn't want to arrange Shnayim Mikra Targum on Shabbat, and he wishes instead to learn Talmud, is he permitted to do so? So says the Geonim to this question, this is what the sages have said. Even though Talmud is dear to him, he should not be negligent in completing his Torah portions. So, and similarly says the Igros Moshe of Moshe Feinstein. He writes, if you look in the middle, on the contrary, even one who studies Torah full time, such as Rav Shimon Bar Yochai, says Rav Moshe Feinstein and his colleagues, who were exempt from tefillah, a rabbinic mitzvah, were obligated in reading Parsha Shnayim Mikra ve'echad Targum. Especially in our generation, as we cannot say that we are experts in the written Torah. So it seems to be everyone should be doing Shnayim Mikra Targum. Doesn't seem anyone can get off with saying I'm
not just for children and for
right,
seminary girls.
Right. It's even for the Geonim and even for the wisest of all should be doing Shnayim Mikra Targum. We talked about. All right, that was a collection of halachot that surround Shnayim Mikra Targum. We did not go through every halacha of it, but we did get a big gist of what was going on in that. Now we're going to continue on the second part of Torah on Shabbat, which is Kriyat HaTorah.
Rabbi Moshe, so bar mitzvah boy, when you can't bar mitzvah, he has to do this mitzvah as well. Every week, read the parasha. Yeah?
For sure. Yeah, even children. Maybe Aki Yosef says even children who are younger, as long as they can start reading. I'll tell you from my own experience that maybe I was 9, 10, around that age. Every Friday we used to come home after school. We came home Friday afternoon, and we got ready for Shabbat. We took our showers. We came out, even during the winters. And my father used to take the tape of Rabbi Ezer Bardes. He was one of the famous Chazanim, Baal Korez, that would read, and he would play it to us. And we read along with the Baal Koreh on the tape. And this guy, he read in real time. He was really slow. and you would read it after him. So you read it with him, read it after him, and then do the Targum. And we would spend our Friday afternoons doing this as children. So it's not just it's everybody. It's a mitzvah for everybody.
Rabbi, but just to add something, I've seen personally fathers who try to press on their recently bar mitzvah children, the boys, to do the Shnayim Mikra, with the Targum. and they're very makbid on this. And I think when it's done I think if it's done in this way, I think it kind of creates a bad taste for the children. In other words, because it's not a mitzvah that they necessarily understand. In other words, when they're reading the Mikra, they're not really understanding the Targum, and I think it becomes tedious for them. And also, I think they
100%.
develop a resentment. And I think maybe, just my humble opinion, could be I'm wrong, even though it's a mitzvah and it's an obligation, but shouldn't we sort of like prioritize mitzvot and says not to create a
100%. Shalom, I think you bring an important point, not just about Shnayim Targum, but in many mitzvahs in general, that it needs to be brought to children in a very pleasing way. Just like when they're 3 years old, you take the honey over the olive base and you put it in their mouth, and you want them to see the Torah mitzvahs as sweet. Obviously, a lot of it has to do with the family and how it's brought to them and stuff like that. And yes, if this kid is going to take it the wrong way and he's going to go away from the basic laws of Judaism because you're trying to make a Shnayim Targum, then obviously that's the wrong path to go on. But we're talking about in a healthy, established family that the people are following mitzvahs and tovim, and the father has
what I'm saying is that
over the children.
I'm saying that the particular nature of this mitzvah. I'm saying the particular nature of this mitzvah, whereas a big chunk of it is reading something that the kid does not understand.
100%,
and so when it's
100%,
you know what I mean? It's not like you're learning Rashi.
So perhaps in the olden days we were doing things we never liked anyway. I don't know. Nowadays kids get away with what they want and what they like and what they do. And if you tell them to do anything else, it brings them a bad taste. And if you know that's the case, then you have to be careful with that. But in the same time, even though they may not be doing it, yeah, they should be made aware that such a chayiv exists, such a takana exists. I mean, they shouldn't be, because unfortunately there are many people today that don't even know about this chayiv, this obligation, this mitzvah that we have to the Shnayim Targum. Many people don't know. Just don't know. They never heard of it. Right? So important to know. But good points. Very good point. All right, let's move on. Kriyat HaTorah. Kriyat HaTorah. The Shabbos, Shiva. You have 7 oilim. And for Hatin Mahen, you can't have less than 7. But you can add more to them. Anyone who ever died in Bukhari and Shul knows you can add many more to them. Right? You can keep adding. Right? Right. I don't tell anyone also add a lot. Umaftirim b'Navi. And we read the Navi at the end. Okay. The Gemara Megillah, source 36 says, "Haini shloisha chamisha v'shiva connected me." 3 on the weekday, 5 in Yom Tov, 7 people going up on Shabbat. What are they connected? So one answer is when they connected the Kohanim, connected the Birkas Kohanim. The first pasuk Birkas Kohanim has 3 words. The second pasuk has 5 words. The third one has 7 words. So 3, 5, 7. That's where we get it from. Another reason is there are different psukim that talk about the 3 guards of the door, the 5 officers of the king, the 7 officers who saw the face of the king. And so there are different reasons why that is, why it's set up that way. The Shibur Le'aleket in source 37, it says, Masachi b'chuvas ha'goyim, lama karim b'Shabbos v'Torah Shiva. He says, you know why you read 7 oilim on Shabbos? Because each oil that goes up says Baruch Hu. So if someone missed shul during the week and didn't say Baruch Hu, he can make up his 7 Baruch Hus during the Aliyah HaTorah, says the Shibur Le'aleket. Right? So that's why you have 7 people going up.
I know for 7 days a week.
The Shibur Le'aleket says, is a Rishon, I found the reason why some people read from the Torah on Shabbat in the response of the Gaonim. This is because in the event, due to circumstances, a person could not come to shul all week and did not hear Baruch Hu, he can listen to Baruch Hu 7 times from those who read and thus fulfill his obligation. Somehow he's making a Baruch Hu during this. I saw an interesting concept also brought down in the laws of Shabbat Rabbeinu Naxon on page 141, Halacha 59, footnote 74. He writes as follows, another reason why there's 7. This is more of a Kabbalistic reason. He says, bringing from the Arizal, that the Aliyot correspond to the 7 Sfirot discussed in Kabbalah. I have no idea what that means, but that's what he said. So apparently there's a Kabbalistic nature to it as well of why it is 7. The Ravia, he writes that he was once in a shul on Simchas Torah. Over Simchas Torah, Yatzatzim Beit HaKnesset, B'chayriya, very upset, right? Kishemati Levela, this guy's Balkari's name was Bella. Chazan Malik Yoitim Arboim Palmim Avor Shisha Pishitim. 6 coins. He kept reading the same part over and over again. Umi heterloi ladali v'ladanu amar u'asher amar. Who let him say u'asher amar 1,000 times? Right? He got very upset. He says, "You can't do this," and he left in protest from the shul. The Rivash, on the other hand, was asked this question: can we add more aliyot? If you're, just make sure you're on mute because we're hearing something in the background. Make sure everyone's on mute. Okay. Go ahead. So the Rivash was asked. Me myself, okay. The Rivash was asked, can we? There's a problem with this, right? We know we're not allowed to use Hashem's name in vain. If we're reading the same psukim over and over again, and you're saying a bracha before and after, it's a bracha levatala. Why should it be allowed? Right? And that was the Ravaya's thing. He says, you're reading the same thing over and over again, and you're making bracha levatalas. So the Rivash is a Talmud of the Ran, and he answers and he says, no, there's no problem with Loi Tisa, no problem with saying Hashem's name in vain. And even sometimes it's necessary. There's no problem. You can read it over and over again, the same psukim. It's no problem. He says, why? He says, we do this. We do it on Hanukkah. You remember on Hanukkah? You read the first one, second one, the guy goes back and read the third one again, then they read the whole thing again. Doing Chol Moed also, that's the way we read it on Sukkot. You read the same thing over and over again. You can read it over, right? So there's no problem. It's not a bracha levatala. Says the Shulchan Aruch, source 40, mutar likros oilim harbe, right? You're allowed to add many more. Aliyah l'Torah on Shabbos. Av mishakar is there, mashakar is there. Even if the same guy read the same thing over and over again. Only the first person and the last person take a bracha. Right. So that's going to come up. That's going to come up. The Magen Avraham brings this up. Okay, give me a minute. Ein bekach klum. He says nothing there. No problem, says the Shulchan Aruch. The Ramah says, v'yesh oisrim. V'chein nahagum yidus einu. He says, in Ashkenaz, we don't do this. Some say it's asur. It says, chut to simchas Torah. Simchas Torah is a rule breaker. Everything that's usually not allowed, all of a sudden simchas Torah becomes allowed. Shnagul harbus v'karim v'nahagu k'sav v'rishayim. Magen Avraham says, ein bekach klum, right, this is what Shulchan Aruch said, mikol mokum, ein oil minyan shiv. It doesn't go to the minyan shiva. If you're reading it over and over again, it's not going to be the minyan shiva. You need 7 aliyahs, right? So if you're just reading the guy over and over again, it's not 7 aliyahs. Right. So we're going to see there's another way to do musif, which is to break it up in smaller sections. The only issue I find with that sometimes, like some shuls are if you sell the aliyah, they think they're getting the aliyah that's printed in the Torah as in the Chumashim that this is revealed. Right. This, by the way, is all arbitrary. Where the points is in the Chumash. If you want to read the history of where the points in the Ar Chumashim come from, it's actually based on what was going. No, it was going on in the way I read it was going on in Germany and places like this. When they would buy the aliyah, they would go up and they'll tell the Valkyrie where to stop, where to start, and stuff like that. And it used to become a whole ruckus in shul. And the Goyim would come and watch how the Jews would go crazy in shul, saying where to stop, where to go, what to do. So at one point, someone said, "We're not doing this anymore. Right? We're going to make a standard. All right, we're going to make some sets in some places. But this is all what you need in order to read an aliyah is 3 psukim. Okay? So what we have in the Chumash is what I've seen happen. I've seen happen like this. So they sold aliyahs, and then they wanted to do musafin and add on more. So the guy who thought he bought Hamishi has now got relegated to an earlier aliyah. But it was Hamishi, but it wasn't the psukim he thought he was going to get. So he said, I bought those psukim. I wanted to read those psukim. Right? So it became a whole balagan in the shul. So perhaps if you're going to break it up in smaller pieces, you should let the Kehillah know beforehand, it's not going to be where you think it is. Right? We can switch it on you, right? Bait and switch. I don't know if you can do that. But you have to become aware of that. But let's see. The Birkei Yosef. So this is the Hidah, right? And he writes, first of all, he says the Rivash his response are not, his proofs are not decisive. He says the Rashbats disagree. Says although many people do like the Rivash and the Shulchan Aruch, and one should not protest it. Nevertheless, one who's God-fearing, it could be strict about this. Should not go up if they do not read new psukim. So the Chidah wanted you to break it up in smaller pieces so everyone gets new psukim. An appointed person whose words are respected among his congregation should direct them all that all olim should read some additional new verses. So the Chidah wanted us to, if you make Musafin, to break it up. Now, the Bukhari shows that we said Davenin, they didn't break it up. They just read from Shishi, they read the last 3-4 psukim again and again and again and again and again, right? Which seems to be, we have what Tusay Mechad, but it seems to be we shouldn't have done that. We should have broken it up smaller. And each one reads new.
Nowadays, a lot of shuls changed that. They started reading only new pesukim.
Very good. Kol kavod. That's the proper way of doing it.
You have to save time, and you shouldn't be burdened on the congregation. Repeating the same thing.
That's also another thing I wanted to mention. First of all, we have to remember the Chachamim shortened Shemona Esrei on Shabbos because of Turkey Tzurba. We want to go home, have pleasure, have a good time. So I don't know if you want to add all these extra people coming up. It's take a lot more time. So perhaps you have to think about that also. Also, in addition, in my experience, I found when you do Musafin, you add those extra aliyos. I've heard this one already. I do whatever I want during that time. I start talking. Tea starts coming out. People start talking about other things. Books, and people lose the covet of the Sefer Torah. Covet of Kriyat Torah is gone because it's hard to tell people to keep listening to the same thing over and over again. So these issues exist. Okay. So I just wanted to read from the Yalkut Yosef outside the Tzurba for a moment on page 279. He writes about this issue of doing Musafin, and he writes over here that if they want to call up more, they can, but you should read a new portion for each person who comes up. He says this is very important in big congregations. If you didn't get more people aliyot, it's going to take a person to get aliyah a very long time because there's so many people there. This is also becomes an issue when there's a simcha, and there's certain people that have to get honors, right? Simchas Torah and stuff like this. He says, if you have no reason to do it, then don't do it, right? Stam, like Rami was saying, stam just to get more money in. No, you shouldn't be doing that. But if there's a reason to it, right? There's a bar mitzvah, there's a chasana, there's something that there's a lot of, all of a sudden a lot of choshev rabbanim came, and you want to give each one a kavod, right? So at that point, it seems that it will be permissible to do it if you break it up, right? He says also you should try to break it up. Okay, fine. Moving on. Okay, so the Magen Avraham, this was a point that Rav Ami brought up. He says, it wouldn't have been a problem calling up all these olim in the traditional way of Kriyat Torah was done, where one person said the opening bracha, and the last person who went up said the concluding bracha. So all the people in between didn't make any brachos, right? So there's no bracha and bracha levatala. But here today, each one makes their own bracha, right? So perhaps, right, it is a bracha levatala. But the Magen Avraham writes down, he says, all the points can imply that even today, when all oil make brachot, adding readers is permissible. That is permissible. As he says, even in the time of the Talmud, it already became that each soul would make their own brachot. And despite this, all the poskim wrote that it's permissible to add readers. This appears correct to me. Harry says, the Rashbat says again, don't do it. So the Magen Avraham ends up saying, do it only when there is a tarach, right? Only if there's a tarach, then you should do it. The Piskei Teshuvot ends off by saying that there were, I don't know who he's referring to, but he says, Shnayim oilam, there are two gedolim that were makbid never to add on. I don't know who he's referring to by these two gedolim. If you know, let me know. But he says, whatever the custom is, to be lenient when there is a tzarech and to add on Shabbat and Yom Tov. Okay. What did I bring down over here? 281. Okay. I don't want to go through that. Okay. There's another. I just mentioned this briefly. I don't want to get into it in depth. There's a lot to talk about it. But what happens if you have to give an aliyah to a non-observant person? Okay. A non-observant Jew. And he has to get an aliyah. So
the musif.
So yeah, give him musif. So you read 6, and then you give him a musif. But if he says, "I know what you're trying to do because I'm not religious," you want to give me the musif. You could give him a regular, but then add on at the end another one, so you get shiva olim who are by themselves. Another issue as well. We don't want to make a
the
fight.
Problem is they buy it.
Right, they buy it. So we don't make a fight. We don't make problems. Let them go up, but you should be careful to make sure that 7 people who are shemitari mitzvahs do go up and get an aliyah. Okay, that's just a brief side note on that. Right, the Baal Koreh is the one who's reading it, and perhaps he's one going up. And again, in fact, maybe there's even an opinion that maybe the Baal Koreh, if he knows there's a non-religious person going up, he should say the bracha in an undertone with him. And that's why it's like his aliyah. Yeah. Okay, next question. I would die. Next question. May a minor, a katan, can a katan get an aliyah? Okay, so Gemara Megillah says, Hakoil oilin leminyan shiva. Everyone can be part of the 7. Afilu katan v'afilu isha. Even a katan and even a woman. Women don't read because of covered tzibur. What that means? Not today's shir. Okay, we'll dedicate a day, maybe one day. What it means to cover the tzibur. Women don't go up. Katan. Say what? Say again. I did. Okay, but good point. But I did. Okay. Shulchan Aruch writes, the katan has to know who he's saying the bracha to. Okay, Shulchan Aruch has that. The katan has to know who he's saying brachas to. The Ramaz says that what I really have to move forward, but source 36, the Kitzer, is why we have 7 aliyos, why 3 aliyos, why 5 aliyos. Yeah. So A is because it's connected the Birkat Kohanim, 3, 5, 7 of the 3 words in the first pasuk, 5 in the second, 7 in the third, 3, 5, 7, or it's psukim based on how many people saw the king or the guards of the king and stuff like that, and that's a representation to it. Fine. Okay. So yes, so the Ramah says these women and children can only count towards the required number of people called Torah. Not all of them can be women or children, meaning you can't have 7 children. They can be part of the 7, but not all 7. Right? Perhaps maybe like a Zimun, right? You can add a child, but not all of them can be children. Right? Maybe, I don't know. Just thinking. Hey, Magen Avraham, right? That he goes and he says no. He says a minor may not act. Okay, this is another part. Okay, so you're saying a katan can get an aliyah. Can the katan also be about Kurd? I'm getting the aliyah. Katan's reading for me. Is that permissible? So the Magen Avraham says no. He says actually each day saras. He needs to be bar mitzvah, so to speak, in order to be reading for someone else, right? If he's a katan, he can't take someone else's an adult's chayv of reading it for him, perhaps. He's learning the Gemara that the Gemara says kol oilin, that and each one would go up and they would read for themselves, not necessarily for someone else, right? In the political time, you got an aliyah, you read it yourself, right? So he's saying you read it for yourself. You're not reading for someone else. So the katan could go up. Oh, you mean he can't be the balkari for someone else? Yeah, for himself when he's oil, when he's oiling. Yeah, fine. But if the next guy is the oiler now, right. So the Magen Avraham says no, he can't do that. Pri Megadim says he could. It's not a problem. If he can be counting towards the 7, he can read it for everyone. That's what the Pri Megadim wants to say. Moshe Feinstein, he brings down, he says, even under pressing circumstances, he wants to go with the Magen Avraham, and he's under pressing circumstances, we do not rule leniently. And a child should not be the balkari for someone else. However, he said, there will be a case where even Moshe would say it's okay, leniently. There's nobody else. No. The bar mitzvah boy got the wrong parsha. He thought his parsha was a week before his bar mitzvah. Okay, and he practiced the whole thing. And now, coming his bar mitzvah, he realized he's not mitzvah till Monday. And he prepared the Shabbat before. So says Rav Moshe over there is the great Targum, right? We don't want to embarrass him and stuff like that. There's no way he's going to prepare the next parsha. So we can rely on the Pri Megadim, and we can allow the boy to read it at that point. You don't have to protest that. You can seem to let it go. Yes. Yeah, he has to read it. Yes. He has to. He should know who he's saying a bracha to. I know. I don't see him putting any dots in between. But you can take a look. Orach Chaim Reish Pei Beis Gimel. Okay. Yeshav Das. So Chacham Ovadia, he writes as follows: V'lein halacha Near Shulchatchila Ein La'ata the Katan Liyosh Chazan Akar B'Torah Kriyas Parsha Kula. Mikol Malcolm. He says, however, B'Shasat Chak Shloinimsa Isher Daily Kar B'Torah. I don't know how you ever find this. There's no one else who knows how to read. Im Tamei Mikra Kedas. Yoichlim L'Smoich Al Poskim HaMitirim. You're able to rely on those postim, seems to be the Pri Megadim, that says that a Katan could read for others. So even Chamabadia says we allow the Katan to go up, but you shouldn't be reading for others unless we're in the jungle somewhere with all these Amarotzim and no one else knows how to read the Torah, and only the Katan knows. Okay, so then he can read. The Magen Avraham adds on, and he says today the minhag, in his time he's talking about Vayidna. If we're bringing up a Katan, it's only for Maftir.
They do in Bay 24.
They do that in Bay 24. Okay, they got a Katan right. I've seen this in other Ashkenazic shows. They do that. The Kappa Chaim brings from the Mati Yehuda, Rabbi Yehuda Ash, who was an 18th century Algerian Poisik, writes similarly that many have the practice not to call a minor at all, not on Shabbat and not on other days. Oh, okay. So Chamavadia says, it seems that Katan Shegil Lechinech knows who's being mivarchin, could get an aliyah technically, and he says certainly he can be called for mafter. But he writes, "Uvamokum sheyesh minhag borer." You have a clear minhag. Shalayla halos Katan l'sefer Torah yasuk minhagah. They should do like their minhag. So then the question always is, do we have an established minhag? Like we never really did it, but was it because we don't do it, or stam we didn't do it? So at that point, we probably shouldn't start doing it if we never did it. Again, if there's a tzarech for it, that's a different story. Okay, then we have what to rely on. Okay, briefly, he talks about Kriyat Torah Mincha and Shabbat. Started Tikkun is Tikkun Ezra, Shekari Mincha b'Shabbos. He says Mishum Yoshvei Karnes, because people who sit on the corner. What does that mean? Okay, and so Rashi, Baba Kama says because the whole week people are sitting in the corners doing business and not learning Torah, so give them more Torah on Shabbos. The Maharsha says not only that, but when people have a day off by the Goyim, right? Day off means you go to the streets and you make protests and light things up and break things. So perhaps, Chas Shalom, we don't give structure to the day, can be problematic. So more Torah, more structure to the day, so people know how to spend their day off. Okay, moving on. Maftir and Haftarah. Okay, so the first question the Gemara Megillah asks, Maftir. When we do Maftir, is Maftir part of the Shiva Island? Are they part of the 7 people who go up? Or is Maftir separate and not part of the Shiva who go up? So the Gemara says it's a machlokes. It's one day yes, one day no, part of the Shiva, not part of the Shiva. Now the Rush says we do see that the Maftir is part of the 7 to go up. He says, I'll tell you from where. Because an Atanis Tzibur Ashkenazim do Haftarah after a Mincha after the 3rd Aliyah. We do that on Tisha B'Av also. We have Haftarah on Tisha B'Av. We have Haftarah on Mincha. So and it's after the 3rd Aliyah. So it's part of the set Aliyahs, says the Rush. So it's part of it. He says it, but he says on Shabbat we want to do like the other day also. Is Maftir. Can it be part of the 7 oilim that go up on Shabbat? We do it as the 8 on Shabbat morning. We do it, and we even do more. We actually say a Kaddish to say we're mashlim everything beforehand, and now we're doing it as a separate piece. But the Rush says we see on Tisha B'Av when we have only 3 aliyahs at Mincha, right? And the 3rd aliyah is the Maftir. He reads the Haftarah. So it shows you that it could be part of the Shiva oilim that go up to the main portion. Not necessarily has to be separate. Okay, we'll talk about it offline. I have to move along, unfortunately. Shulchan Aruch says, so you read some of what you read before in the Maftir. Okay, the Haftarah. The Torah writes, we read from the Navi, and we read 21 verses. You have to read 21 psukim. Right, and the Abu Draham brings down what was the reason? Because at some point, and it seems to be during the times of Antiochus, that the Greek king Antiochus, he forbade learning Torah or reading the Torah. But for whatever reason, the Nevi'im that was okay. So we found topics that were similar to the parsha in the Navi, and we know that every oila, every aliyah has to have 3 psukim. So if you add 7 times 3 is 21. So the Torah says you have to read 21 psukim for the HaTorah. The only time where you don't have to do 21, if the Indian is mashlim in less than 21 psukim. So if you have a HaTorah that's the topic of the HaTorah ends in less than 20 psukim, then it can be less than 20 psukim. But usually it should be 21. Okay, so here comes the whole back and forth. I don't want to get into it too much because we're running out of time, but you should know some ideas over here. The Levush said, I'm very surprised that people are reading HaTorah and they're not reading it from an actual sefer. The Torah read from a sefer. Megillah doesn't read from a sefer. HaTorah should also be read from a sefer. It should be written down on cloth, right? So that's what he writes. Tzurba says, the Taz writes, I don't know if you really need that. It's perhaps the handwritten is also okay. And even if it's in a sefer, it's okay. Even the Chumoshim, it's okay. The Magen Avram, so now there's another issue. There's a sefer called Sefer HaTorah, which only brings the Haftarahs of the year. Perhaps, says the Magen Avraham, that's not so great. Maybe I should have it from a whole sefer of a Navi. Maybe I should take a Tanakh that has the whole Navim Ksuvim in there, and I should read the Haftarahs from there. There are actually some Sefer Haftarahs, I've seen it, especially in Ashkenazic shuls, they have like these big Sefer Haftarahs that have everything, and the Haftarahs of the year are on bigger print, right? But the rest of the words are in there as well. So this way you're getting the whole Sefer. Says the Mishnah Berurah also that it's better to have the Haftarah written on cloth in an actual sefer. I think that good that has each sefer separately, right? So they have everything separately. The Gra was very big into that also. He said you should have it. You should have every sefer of maftir, of Haftarahs and the Nevi'im in separate svarim, and you should read it from a cloth. Right. So Yechavidas, so this is important for us. The Chamavadia writes, mitzvah lahad likra Haftarah mitoich sefer hakoset b'ksav yad kedusha al klaf. He says you should mitzvah and the best way to do it is to read it off a cloth. Says Chamavadia, and he says, but you don't have to have each navi separately. Says Chamavadia, right? Because the Gra was saying everyone says you should have each navi separately. He says, "Vafilu rak likut Haftarah shel Shabbos Shoshana ve'enon is sefer navi shalim." As long as it's written on cloth the Haftarah, that's better. V'im ein sham sefer kazeh. If you don't have a cloth with the Haftarahs, adif likra Haftarah misefer navi shalim. It's better to read it from a full sefer, and not the way we have it over here. So we have talked to Tzion about this. Right? Read it from a whole Tanakh rather than reading it from like we have Sefer Haftarahs like in the print, and it's just all the Haftarahs there. It seems to read from a full sefer is better, and it seems if you get it on cloth, it's even better. How the Piskei Teshuvah says there's another idea with going on all this over here. It's going to be very hard for people to read the Haftarah. You're reading it from cloth, right? But perhaps that's even better. Perhaps it's even better to have a way that it's always one person who's reading the Haftarah, right? Because we're going to come into another issue. The issue is the person who's going up to Maftir. Is he the same person who has to actually read the Haftarah, the words of the Navi? Okay, so the Rivash says it has to be the same exact person. The person who's reading the going to come he has to read the words of the Navi. It can't be someone else. But the Beit Yosef says not necessarily true. It could be someone else reading it. Okay, the Ramah writes this as well. Someone else may read it, but l'chatchila you should call someone up who's going to be able to read the Haftarah itself. You shouldn't, if you know this guy can't read the Haftarah, you should not l'chatchila call him up for maftir. The Chai Adam says that if you're reading from a cloth, then it's okay because the regular guy doesn't know how to read from a cloth to Haftarah. So then he can read the maftir himself, right? Read maftir, read the oiler, and then let the Balkari read everything, including the Haftarah, because it's from a cloth. The Yaskil Avdi. This is Rabbi Ovadia Hadaya, born in Syria, moved to Eretz Yisrael, was a big posek there, and he writes that when it comes to the cloth, that's true. You can have the Baal Kori read it, but he says, you know what? It can even be true when you read from a chumash. Since it's allowed by a cloth for someone else to read it, it's even okay by a chumash to let someone else to read it. But if perhaps he writes it should be the Baal Kori and not some other stranger, and it shouldn't be 2 or 3 people reading from it, but it should be done as the Balkari read the Torah, reading the HaTorah as well for that person. So lechatchila, we should not call someone up to maftir. He doesn't know how to read the HaTorah himself, but if he doesn't and you need someone else to read it, it seems to the Balkari could read it. Okay, and this will end off today's shir. Bez Hashem, next week we will start Hilchot of Kiddush on Shabbat. Rabotai, after the 8th shir, I was wondering, do you want to do? There's an optional test. I was thinking we do the test with Tzibor. We do the test all together as a group, as a kabura. If you guys are interested in doing that, let me know. I have to order volume 17. If you want in, please text me or message me so I can get them for you. Be'ezrat Hashem. Yes, we have an announcement.
שהוא חשוב מאוד, זכיתם, רק חשוב, איזה הלכות. בת כנסת ישראל עומד אחרי 4 חתונות של 4 ילדים בפרובות מצטברים מגיעים למעלה $100,000. יש לי בן שהתחתן לפני 5 חודשים, גייסו אותו לפני 3 חודשים והוא נמצא בעזה. אני עושה כל מה שאני יכול כדי לסייע לו בכל מה שאני יכול. הוא מתקשר אליי, אבא, גם לא יכול להתקשר, פתאום מתקשרת, קשה לנו, אל תדאגי. אני שולח, מכניס להם לחשבון, כל מה שאתם יכולים לעזור, יהיה לכם ברכה, הוא מוסר נפש על עם ישראל ועל כולנו. כל מי שיכול לעזור, שתבואו חסד כל משל לכם לעזור בכרטיס אשראי. כולם יזכו קרה.
טוב. רבי חנינא בן עקשיא אומר, רצה הקדוש ברוך הוא לזכו ישראל, לפיכך חפץ חיים תורה מצוות שנאמר, אדוני חפץ למען צאתו יגדל תורה וידיר.